Welcome to the MCP Project Podcast. Here is where we have guests come all over that are just very experienced in their field and giving hope, inspiration, and all of the above. So today we have Mr. Scott Messick. He is a well-known TV producer and a dear friend of mine, Scott. And we could go on and on, but I'll kind of hand the mic over to you about you because I'll just keep talking.
So a short background? Do you want a short background?
Yes, so people know you.
So I started in television, in sports television at NBA Entertainment. So that was early in my, actually it started in a really small Wayne's World cable kind of station. And I did neat. Everything from religious programming to high school sports to commercials to all this stuff. And it was hysterically funny when I look back on it because the stakes were so low and I made so many mistakes. And then I moved to New York. That was in Delaware. Anybody been to Delaware? Nobody in this room has probably been to Delaware. Yeah, have you?
Oh, that's so funny.
But yeah, my career started in Delaware, and I went to University of Delaware, which is not a communications television type school.
Oh, okay.
But I moved to New York after that, and I knocked around New York looking for a job in sports television, right? And which is very hard to find. And at that time, it was ABC, CBS, and NBC were doing sports, and I sent letters and all that stuff to all of them, and I still have somewhere the denial letters, right?
Cool.
And literally what happened is I went another route, and I chased Major League Baseball productions and NFL films, and NBA Entertainment was just starting. So NBA Entertainment was that was just blowing up. This was in the 80s. This was like 1985. And I ended up getting a job there. And literally what was really funny is we had the contract to do all of the features, the get up close and personal things for CBS. So literally, if I had gone to CBS and gotten the job that letter begat, I would have worked probably 8 years as a broadcast associate, like working my way up the ladder before I would have a feature on CBS. But because I went to the NBA and we had the contract with them, basically within a year of getting a denial letter, I had stories on CBS Sports. So it was really funny.
That is
the
so
weird way that it happened.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So from the NBA, I went to we did a show. I moved to Washington, D.C. to do a show called USA Today on TV, which was based on a newspaper. And I worked in the sports division there. And that was a great run. And then I moved back to New York, and I worked on 2 shows at once, which were, it seems really weird when I look back on it. But at the same time, I was doing America's Most Wanted, right? So going out and like chasing criminal, like doing stories on murderers and rapists and criminals. And at the same time, I was doing Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous with Robin Leach. Do you know that show? Does anybody know that show?
Yes, that is so...
Yep, exactly.
I love that.
Oh my God.
Oh my gosh.
Robin Leach, man.
What
a trip. So we did, so Robin, that was a really heady time. It was really fun. I got to travel the world, honestly, because part of why I got into this, honestly, was to travel.
Okay, that was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, what really had your interest in going into something like this?
I mean, ultimately, it was travel because, well, you know what? It was a combination of 2 things. It was, I didn't really know what I wanted to do for a living. And I had seen a show called Evening Magazine, and it was out of San Francisco, and these people would go out and do stories on all kinds of different people, like haunted house people, like podcast people, like sports stars, like everything. And I was like, God, wouldn't it be good to go do stories on all those people? And, one of them I'll figure out maybe that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And then it actually became what I wanted to do. And it begat an incredible bunch of travel, like literally all over the world, because some of the things that came up in that timeline is after the Lifestyles and America's Most Wanted, I moved back to New York and I worked for NBC doing the Olympics. So I went out and I did all those up close and personal features on the Olympics.
So that's really interesting. I mean, I have to stop you there with having experienced America's Most Wanted, Lifestyle of the Rich and Famous, and now you're looking at the Olympics. What a crazy diverse time, like to experience all of those all within the same time frame. How was that? Like seeing how people lived their lives, seeing how people worked, trained for the Olympics, and then doing all of those different things. What did you gain from that? What was like so interesting to you about working on all those different sets at that time?
It was not boring because I was always moving on to another story, moving on to another project. Like it was so not 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And it's so not glamorous as everybody perceives, you know, but it's also, you know, I lean into two things really. Like I'm a people person. Like I'm really comfortable talking to people, whether they be strangers or friends or, you know, intimate, you know, and I'm curious. So I love interviewing people, right? It's one of my favorite things, just to and casting and stuff like that. It's like, you know, it's like casting is like being an unlicensed psychologist. You can just ask whatever you want, and you know,
I like that. That's funny.
But it was a combination of that plus, you know, a truly innate thing of being creative. Like one of the turning points, like music is really important in all things. And I did a show called MTV Sports, which was music and sports together. And it was this crazy, you know, it was another one of those underdog things where MTV Sports was this small show. This was in right after the Olympics I did. And it was when MTV was rising, and I had this guy, Dan Cortez was the host, and I hired this woman named Gabrielle Reese as my correspondent, and Henry Rollins was my Andy Rooney type character. And we did a sports anthology show, but this was way ahead of the X Games and, you know, all that stuff. So we did surfing, we did snowboarding, we did, you know, sky surfing, we did motocross, we did, you know, snow motor, like we did everything that was offbeat and adrenaline sports, basically. Sure. And we did it with music. I had the entire MTV library, so basically any music that you could use. And our edit style was so, you know, aggressive and interesting and fun and music-based. And we broke music, and we actually won. Like we went to the sports Emmys, basically. Yeah. And I remember we had a tiny seat all the way in the back of the auditorium, and then it was TBS and TNT and CBS and ABC and NBC and all the legacy sports things we were up against like Wide World of Sports and NBC Sports World and all these things. And we won the Emmy.
Oh my gosh.
So it was like this awesome walk from the back of the room all the way past all these, you know, all of the
big names.
Yep.
And,
But it was really, and the speech was about how music and sports are made to go together. And it's like, you know, it was always a core creative tenet. Like I've always been, and it's visual too. Like I'm also a very visual person, like whether taking photographs, whether, you know, what I watch and, you know, like just seeing things differently. I see things differently. Hard to explain.
That's a gift.
Yeah.
I think so, because not if people could.
That's a compliment. Some people.
It
you
is.
can call it a gift. I'll call it a sickness and a weirdness. But it is.
Everything, you know,
I'll
perception.
Take it as a gift.
I think it's a gift because a lot of people can't see that visual, and that's what helps the creative side of things. So with having experienced that and sitting in the back and winning the award, What did that do for you? Like that feeling, because the underdog and like not being known and kind of just going out there and taking a chance and seeing something come to light. And I guess, could you explain what did that prompt you to want to do more? Were you hungry for more? Did you feel like that was such a great accomplishment, winning an Emmy and being in the back to now accepting the award? And so I'm just curious. I would love to hear what your experience was with that.
Well, it did make me want to do more, but it also is, you don't realize stuff like that when it's happening to you. You have to look at it in retrospective, like what a big moment it was. Because it was Friday. Like it was it was the next thing, and it had happened, and it was great, and it was fun. But the sort of headiness of it and the where it fits in a timeline of my life, I didn't really even think about. It was just like I did it, and that was great. And now we have another show to do and to keep going and all that stuff. And also I think part of the male mentality of like, expecting your own success a little bit and like, and then, and not patting yourself on the back and not taking a victory lap and, like it's expected to succeed, right? And it's like, and I don't know, it's a weird thing because it's, I mean, it didn't blow up my ego. I was confident already. It added to my confidence for sure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I didn't turn into an asshole.
Well, that's good.
I was just proud of it. And I'm more, put it this way, to simplify all that, I'm more proud of everything I've done now than I was then because I was in the middle of it then. And it was hard to sort of step out of it and see it in context.
I really appreciate that. I think having the gift of being able to look back to and see everything that you've accomplished and what's brought you here today is a blessing in itself. And then also sharing that in the moment, maybe for our audience to try to stop and enjoy the moment because it does happen so quick and you are working and you're building and ready. But at the same time, it's nice to just give yourself that grace of like, whoa. But I don't know that men typically do that often. I don't know that women do either.
The biggest hiccup of it all is that is like, I have 2 kids, right? And they're 22 and 19, 2 boys. And they have no idea what I've accomplished. Like, because they look back on it and they're like busy looking at social media or busy doing their things. And they have no real idea of the impact that I've made in my chosen field, like whatever version. So that makes me sad because they don't really understand, like when I say, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous or Survivor or the Olympics, to them, they're like, yeah, it's
like
that.
That's crazy because most
ride to the park.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that's because it's dad. You're dad, and that's what dad does. But
yeah, it's a deep thing though. It's like I really wish they understood.
Yeah, I can understand that too because all the hard work and everything that you've poured yourself into to build something and having your kids see the accomplishments of it all is just that's really special.
But it's funny because I sort of did it. I mean, then I was doing it for me, not for them.
Right.
It's now that I sort of think back on it.
Yeah. Well, I can understand that too. Being a parent, it's definitely when you're you are doing it for you, but they get to, they're part of you and the extension of you. So they get to kind of be along with the ride. So if they don't really take hold of all that you've done, it's kind of sometimes like, oh, I kind of wish you.
Yeah, it's fine.
But that's just life. We get busy, we work, and then the kids sometimes just miss. I get like that too with mine. I'm like, do you even know what we're doing right now? And no, but it looks like you're busy. But so tell us more about from the Olympics, from that point, what happened next in your journey?
Next big thing, Olympics and MTV Sports were sort of parallel. And then I moved to LA. So this was all in New York.
Okay.
So I moved to LA in 1995. And I started directing. I was doing, what was called alternative TV. So I did like these big network shows. I met a friend of mine who I'd done stuff for. Behind Closed Doors with Joan London was a big CBS show. Our ABC show, How They Do That was a CBS.
Okay.
And it was more of the same. Like I was directing stories. Like I did these things for Lifetime called Intimate Portraits, which were like big biography type shows. We did. Actually, I had spread pretty far from sports right there, and I was doing all kinds of other, human interest and personal lifestyle type stories, things like that. And then I started directing commercials, which was really fun because it was visual and it took my MTV Sports mentality, and there was a lot more money in it, and I did pretty big spots. I did like a bunch of Skechers. I did a Reebok spot. I did Hillshire Farms. I did a couple other like fairly big brands, and but I was in the 90% of the directors who were fighting for 10% of the work, as opposed to being in the 10% of the directors who do 90% of the work. And I was trying to get across, but it was like you had to work so hard to work. Like basically, like it was constant auditioning in a way.
Okay.
Like in order to direct a big commercial or to be that, there was like the system that was in place and is still in place is everything is triple bid, right? So it's like, here's a concept, it comes to you. You're one of 3 companies who bids for it. You create some incredible visual campaign and write up something, and you do this constantly, and then you're not the one chosen, and then somebody else, and you're not. So you do so much work to get work, and I was like, "This is." Can I curse?
Yeah, you can say whatever.
Like, this is bullshit, man. This is
Yes.
like so exhausting, and I'm not even doing what I love. Like I'm just trying to get to do what I love. So, but it was still fun. I was doing both, and then. What happened was, because of my MTV Sports background and all the sports stuff and the commercial stuff, I got an offer to do a feature film, right? So a full-on movie. It was, and it was when snowboarding was breaking. This was 1999. Like snowboarding was rising fast, and it was snowboarders against the skiers kind of thing, set at a mountain. And first of all, it was bizarre to me. I was like, wait a minute, like you're going to let me direct a movie? Like that? Because that was like this rarefied air of like, I was so far from that, right?
Sure,
And it was like,
yeah.
So you don't know all this stuff, right?
I know.
Okay.
I know. This is why I'm like, keep sharing.
So anyway, I was hired because I was directing commercials and because of the skiing and snowboarding and MTV Sports background, and they were always looking for sort of young breakthrough directors. That's sort of the movie industry there. And I got a 3-picture deal with Universal, and this guy Bob Simons was the guy who hired me, and he had just done Waterboy and Happy Gilmore, so he was in that broad comedy place. And I came in and cast, I just came in and, with confidence, and I went to work doing it. I was scared a lot, but I was also confident. And it was a $5 million movie, and it was going to be released at Thanksgiving. And the cast that I put together was amazing because I was pretty pop culture savvy, and I had an eye for people, and like I just sort of was edgy, more edgy than most at the time. And so the cast that I put together, this is in 2000.
Okay.
Right? And this was Paul Walker, who went on and did Fast and the Furious. Scott Conn, who was James Caan's son, he did like a bunch of big CBS network stuff and movies. He was in all the he had a big role in all the Ocean's 11 things, right? Scott Conn.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Then Jamie Kennedy, who was a comedian and has had a bunch of stuff. And then Jessica Biel, Colorado girl. Yep. And then Jessica Alba. And the Daniels twins were like two hot blonde twins. And Henry Rollins. And then this guy, Paul Gleason, who was the principal in the Breakfast Club.
Oh, okay.
So it was this sort of like, it was this incredible mix of cast. And honestly, even though if I was horrible as a director and the AD did the job and people carried me, like the movie would have made $10 million. It would have doubled its money, right? Sure. Being, with how many screens it was going to go on and all that stuff. And it seemed too good to be true, which ultimately it was, because it like literally within like we had set up at Banff. We were going to shoot in Canada, and it was all ready to go. And then the bottom dropped out, and the one of the financial backers backed out, and then it got killed. It was done, and I was like, shit. Now what? And like that's when two people through the networks that I had sort of grown up through and came and asked if I was interested in interviewing for this new show that was going to be on CBS. It was a, sort of a survival type show. And I went in and interviewed, and it was a Swedish format. They had done it in Sweden on a very low scale. And this guy, Mark Burnett, had the rights to it. So I interviewed with this guy, Mark Burnett, and Craig Pelagian. And my background of, directing sports and visual, MTV sports and visual commercials and, general leadership skill set, I got the job, and it turned out to be Survivor, the first season of Survivor, which, I went to Borneo, and I was there for, 6 weeks, and we shot the show that was like a constant, it was the first season, so nobody knew, we were building the system. Like the cast, the cast that we built was incredible. Still to this day, probably the best cast. But what made it amazing is that no one knew the rules, or no one knew how to play the game. Everybody learned about Survivor on the island live. They learned about alliances. They learned about backstabbing. They learned about evilness. And it was like this really interesting time in television. It was the launch of reality TV. Yeah. Really. And, the thing that was interesting is that they had done, I was at MTV when Real World was being done. Mm-hmm. And Real World was, a sort of house reality show where you're a follow doc of people. But they were all like 22-year-olds, right? And all full of themselves and all believing that they know everything.
I used to watch it.
Yeah, of course.
I remember.
Yeah, it was a great show.
Yeah.
And, and it was purposely cast that way. But what we did was, the premise of Survivor was to take people from all walks of life, right? We had 66-year-old millionaires. We had gay retired military people. We had ex-Navy SEALs. We had housewives. We had, college kids. It was such a gamut. A doctor, and we had this gamut of personalities, and no one had ever done that across ages and sexes and, and ideological thoughts and all that stuff, and put them all together. And basically, the premise was to take them to this place, strip them of everything that is their identity, that makes them a millionaire. You take away their money and their plane, and put them on an island with a college kid, and they're equals all of a sudden. Yeah. And then who out of that 16 people is going to rise to the top and be the alpha,
So as being the director of something that is brand new, unknown, how do you direct that? How do you make that work?
Well, there are three big parts to it, right? And my skill sets worked. Number one, there is the overall coverage of, you have to make a plan to cover 16 people in 2 different places on an island. You have to have a home base. We brought edit systems there so we can work. I mean,
Okay.
it was a small army, of moving people to an island in Borneo. And then there were 3 parts to it. There was the reality, right? There was their everyday interactions with each other.
Mm-hmm.
There were the challenges, which are like mini sporting events, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the tribal council, which is like a talk show. So because I had done elements of all of those things, and, you had to tie it all together from a vision point of, it had to have a feeling of Robinson Crusoe and being stranded on an island and Gilligan's Island and all the cultural icons, because oddly, like everybody, the best shows in reality TV or unscripted TV come from these fairy tale fantasies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has had a core thought of, could I survive on a desert island? Once you read Robinson Crusoe or you see media, whatever it is, everybody thinks, could I do it?
Yeah.
So it's transferring yourself to that. And like The Bachelor, why that's successful is because that's basically Cinderella. It's like, who's going to put the shoe on? Like, who's the perfect match?
Yep, exactly.
But so there were those 3 parts. Now the challenges were perfect because you had to figure out, like you're covering a sporting event, there was a set of rules to the challenge. Everybody had to start here and end here, and they had to go through these things. And so you basically had to put cameras. First of all, you had to shoot it like a football game because you had to make sure the motion was always going right to left. It couldn't go this way and then that way.
Oh.
So you always had to have cameras up ahead, and you could shoot from this way, the 2 end zones, and then you can shoot this way. You couldn't, but you can't cut from here to here because someone's running through the screen right to left, and then all of a sudden they're going that way.
Oh my gosh.
So you have to think of it as a sporting event.
Yeah.
And then you have to deploy your resources because the challenges were so big and they were in and out of the water. We had to put cameras on all of, you had to have a camera for the host because Jeff Probst was talking to the people, and you had to have one at the beginning and one for close-ups and one for this and that. So it was an incredibly complex, every challenge was complex, and we only had 10 cameras.
Oh my gosh.
So a lot of times we would have cameras here, and this guy's job was to see them leave, and then he would run ahead and be here. And then after, everybody would run ahead to get in front.
So how was it when you got off from work? When you actually got
I never did. I went to the edit room.
I know.
On the
so
island.
crazy.
We would go to the edit room. And then there were tribal council, which was an incredibly intense, we had a certain amount of cameras and we lit it beautifully. We had it was like a movie in a way because we had a camera department, we had an audio department, we had an art department that built the sets and built all those things. We had a lighting department, we had a story department, we had an AD department, we had, an editing department. We had all those things. And you had to simultaneously keep all those wheels spinning at the same time, it was never a Swiss clock, but it was, because it was.
Sure, you had to keep moving.
And all with dealing with weather and lightning and, rain and, crazy, pirates. There were pirates. We had security guys because we were on this, island in the South China Sea, and there were pirates around and stuff.
That's crazy.
But it was the greatest experience work-wise of my life because it was so focused. And directing it is the really hard, as hard as it sounds to direct, like finishing on the tribal council, like you always had to have cameras on people, but you knew the story in your head. And I was in like a little shed in the woods, like by the set, and we knew that, you know, this person had screwed over this person and this was going to happen. And, you know, we never knew the votes, right? We never knew, you know.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
So basically those people would, you know, we would watch Jeff sort of deal with them, and you had to have cameras on the people that mattered, you know, because we didn't have a camera for everybody. You had to be like directing and say, you know, get Marissa, go, get Josh, go move over here and get here. I know, like you could hear where a talk was going, or you could hear who Jeff was about to speak to. And then we had a place where they would go do their votes, and oh my God, that would like create a whole, you know, we knew now this person was getting voted out, and like this person had switched and backstabbed them. So then there was this whole, like we would bring the votes into the booth, and Mark Burnett and me and Craig Pelagian and you know, one or two other producers would like look at it, and we'd go, and Jeff would come in, and we would figure out how we're going to tell the next, you know, 5 minutes of the story, and then we'd go back out and we put the votes in the order so it would create a, you know, a dramatic,
intense. It
you
was
know,
intense,
like
and
so
like,
you think it's one, you know, like if one person had 3 votes and the other had 5, you would do, or you know, it was actually it was only never that many, but it was basically you would do 2 of one person, and you're like, oh my God, everybody's like that person's going to go, and then it would like 3 of the other, and it's like it was just a wacky sort of in the moment, high stakes, urgent, you know, thing.
Were they like, was it chaos when they knew they were getting voted off?
It was, their faces changed. They, you know, some of them knew it was coming. Some of them had no idea, and they were, you know, and remember, this prize, 16 people got to come to this island. Just by getting to the island, you had a 1 in 16 chance of winning $1 million.
Yeah.
And as it went closer and closer, you know, it's $1 million.
Yeah.
It's a life-changing amount of money, especially at that time.
Sure.
And so the stakes were high, and, you know, and there was all this weird psychology is that you wanted to be a leader, but you didn't want to be a target. And like you had to be very careful of like all of it. So, but truthfully, the hardest thing to direct was the reality, was the unscripted part, and that was done by some of the producers in the field or by me. It's because the games themselves were meant to create story, right? So every competition had a winner and a loser, and the stakes were so high because remember, we didn't give them, well, we gave them unlimited water, and they had enough rice to sustain a human being.
Oh my gosh.
That's it. Like that was all we gave them, was enough rice. So most of the prizes, the victories, were food. And so when they won, they would go back and eat something that they were starving for, and the other group would go back and continue to eat rice. Barely rice.
Oh my gosh.
And be mad at each other. So it created story, and then, you know, whoever was too slow would get ostracized or whatever, and then they had to, and then there was all this psychological drama behind the scenes of people talking to each other and trying to team up and get this person out or see who's a threat and say, oh, they're a threat. Like, it was cutthroat and psychologically deep. And
I was going to say the mental keeps coming to my mind is like the mental toughness of that. Like, were there any that stood out that were just didn't let it get too crazy for them, like the cast wise, or did it get really crazy for everyone? Because you're winning $1 million, you're not eating, you're going through. But were there any cast members that like you'd say were pretty strong throughout the show?
Yeah. I mean, the final 4 were amazing. Like Susan, who was the truck driver from Green Bay, Kelly Wigglesworth, who was the, 22-year-old river guide, foul-mouthed river guide, and Richard, the gay, manipulator,
Yeah.
And Rudy, the ex-Navy SEAL, like he was 70 years old. They were strong through it all, but they were an alliance. So the other thing that happened is like people formed alliances and, you know, it's just an artificial environment and people get super close and, you know, the stakes are high, but, you know, they all got through it. I mean, that was, you know, like we part of the purpose of the show too is hardly anybody talked to them. Like, because if they talked to the crew, right, the crew was forbidden to talk to them. The only people that talked to them were like me, Mark Burnett, the challenge producer, John Kerhofer, and their producers on the beach.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And very rarely did they talk to them. Because the whole idea was for these people to turn all their attention inward to each other.
Makes sense.
Like to you know, to be on an island in Borneo and, you know, talking to the camera crew about how are the Rockies doing in the, you know, they
Takes
win,
away
you know,
from the
it just takes people out of it. So there was sort of rules and stuff like that, and you know, and they all were manipulative too, and you know, they were trying to get food from the crew, and
oh my gosh,
you know, they had their, you know, people turn.
Seeing all the craziness of that and how people handled it and what people did because they're starving, looking for money, all of those things. You're like launching a new form of television. Can you share with us how that, like, what that did for television and you taking it on and all of that?
So, I mean, look, it was the start of reality TV in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It was the wave. It's not that there wasn't a version of reality TV before that. It just gave it a name, really. And other shows came out at that time. Big Brother came out. The Bachelor came out. Dancing with the Stars came out. There were a lot of big. American Idol came out. A lot of these big format shows on the networks, and it launched this wave of a new kind of cheaper television in a way, but all wrapped around authentic people, right? It was much more, it wasn't actors acting as real people. It was real people being themselves.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing, you know, it was like a comet. Like it just sort of grew and got hotter and hotter and hotter and crazier and crazier. Like all the shows, the Mama June and like, you know, the 1,000-Pound Sisters and the like every nook and cranny, like what were they called? The Duck Dynasty.
Oh yeah.
Like every subculture in the world, really, but mostly in the United States, got a microscope on it. Crocodile hunters and fishermen, and you know, like lawyers, and then Real Housewives. Who were, like all of these things that are fascinating when you put a TV lens on it, and you have crafty editors and crafty storytelling. Like you can tell their stories, and it's very interesting because it just sort of opened up an authentic view of people. It's almost like social media now, and why social media I think has blown up is because, like, when I look on TikTok and I'm like cruising through, like I can look at a 60-year-old father who has retired and is fishing, right? And then I can look at a 16-year-old high school boy who's playing football, and a 21-year-old college girl who's dating, and a 29-year-old woman in New York who's had 10 bad dates in a row. Yeah. And I can absorb all of those real stories just by going like this. Yep. And that reality TV was that version of that, where we got this window into all these places across America that we, sometimes you read about them in magazines, but this was beamed into your home. Yeah. And it was crafted into bite-sized packages of half hours or hours, and the stories evolved over, and some of the these people became huge stars. The Kardashians.
Yeah.
They seem to do fine.
Yeah, exactly. They seem to do pretty good. I'm really curious for you, seeing these people in what you're directing in reality TV and seeing how their mind works and being placed with the camera and having to actually go through with the show and see who they really are. What did that do for you to actually see it through that lens? We all got to experience it from our couch, but being behind it as the director, kind of what we were talking about. But for you specifically, how did that change or elaborate your perception on people and the human mind and what it's capable of and what people, why they behave the way they do, what they do? Like, what did that do for you?
I had a lot of fun, to be honest. I really enjoy people to begin with. I enjoy
Did it kind of like open I'm sorry, my just thinking.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did it open your eyes to empathize with people more, kind of understand? You were able to kind of engage with why people feel the way that they do. I think
it gave me more data,
yeah,
right? Like the more people you know intimately, whether you truly know them intimately or not. Like I knew people very intimately because I could do casting and ask them any questions, or I had 10 cameras on them and I watched what they did all day long. And, and in every format, in all the kind of shows I did like sports shows and I did, gamer shows and I did dating shows and I did survival shows and I did like redneck shows and like all of those worlds I was able to dip into, but data, I like all this data that sort of I absorbed and I can, it helps me immensely with first impressions and stereotypes.
Connecting, I think,
like I can like the guy who sat with us.
Yeah.
Like I had him read like
we had an interesting experience.
I had him clocked, and sometimes it's like honestly that was sort of like inviting him to sit down for 5 minutes. I was like, I want to see if I'm right about all of my preconceptions and stereotypes about him, which I knew I was already.
Sure.
But we all learn those skills. The more social you are, the more you learn those skills, and amplify that by 10 by doing it, for a job.
Right. And that's where I was going with that, because I love building relationships. I love, meeting people and getting to know people, and just being in a director's role where you're watching all different types of people connect, work together, not work together, all the things. I just think it opens up such a world view for like a huge view for you on how people operate. And I think that's pretty amazing, actually. You could be probably a doctor if you wanted to for a psychology.
I would have a good bedside manner because I've learned how to talk to people.
Exactly.
But no, it is, directing. See, it's very different than directing actors, right? Because directing actors, which I've done a little of, but not much of, is a, you have a vision in your mind of what the story is, and you have to communicate that, and you have to see it come out through them. Whereas in unscripted and reality, you have to allow them to be themselves and eliminate all obstacles to them being themselves.
Oh, see.
Which sometimes are, they try to be what they think you want them to be.
Right. They're like waiting for you to kind of give them the direction of how they should handle this situation and all of that, where it's not the case.
And a lot more of it is directing in unscripted, is directing cameras to be in a place to capture what you predict is going to happen in real life.
That's so cool.
Right? Like in acting, it's like, I know that I'm going to get that person to stand right here, and I'm going to make sure these lights are right. And when they stand there, he's going to say this. Yeah. Like in unscripted, like somebody's going to like walk in, they're going to like go get a glass in the darkest place in the room. They're going to say the most important thing, and I have to try to figure out how to eliminate that or light
Use them.
those parts or, figure out some crafty way to sort of, hope that, is recreated. Like here's a good example. Like Bootcamp was the show I did with, we took 16 people and we hired real life drill instructors.
I remember that show.
You saw it? It's amazing, man.
Gosh.
Boot camp was amazing.
That's like 2003.
Yep.
I love you.
I edited my first. Sorry to interrupt. I edited my first video to that, and so I would splice in us working out and the drill sergeants.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that show.
Save the mama for your drama. Boot camp was amazing in that it was really one of my favorite shows because we took real people and it was real character arcs because fat people became skinny, assholes became humble, people it was like
the transformation.
The transformation was amazing, and it was all through these 4 drill instructors, and we set up these competitions run by the drill instructors. But what we could do is we would see story developing between 2 people, and like I could just pull a drill instructor and say, all right, I want you to make that person, cry. Boom. And then I want you so they were our on-camera ADs almost. Like we could make them.
You could control the narrative with
them, but they had power, the drill instructors, because their goal in this was they came in, and it was a very authentic show because their goal was to build these people back up and create a team and a unit and to improve all those people just like you do in a real boot camp.
Yep. And I love that because when we were saying transformation, but it was for the greater good. Like they were transforming to better themselves.
Oh my God, it was amazing, the show.
I bet that
especially if you saw it, it was under, and what happened with the show, actually, this is a good story. So what happened is I had left Survivor after the first year because there was so much credit to go around, and Mark Burnett wasn't, his skill set wasn't really sharing credit. Like he took all the credit, and it was just one of those things that, it was, his show. Like he had the format, he was the executive producer. All credit goes to him. But there was so much credit to go around, and so I wasn't going to get it any hotter, or bigger in the business, and I chose, I chose to leave after the first season. Deeper story, but the basic gist is, I chose to leave and bet on myself. So I went out and I did the show called Boot Camp, and it was on Fox. And about halfway through, Survivor season 2 was being filmed in Australia. We did Boot Camp in Florida. Boot Camp was on the air, like the 4th episode or something. I got called up to the office of the guys I was working with, and basically the bottom line is CBS and Survivor were sued Fox and Element, which was the production company I was working with, and me by name, for stealing, their ideas. And we were like, that's bullshit. Basically, they said it looks and feels similar to Survivor, and there's an elimination, and there's this and that. And it was like this whole giant media lawsuit. And me by name was like CBS, gigantic network, thousands of lawyers were like suing me, Scott Messick, like living in my little house in Santa Monica.
Are you? Well,
no, you don't know that.
Oh my gosh. Well, what happened?
So the people, I had to hire a lawyer, like a good lawyer, because the truth of the matter is I didn't know if Fox, people at that level are, cutthroat.
Yeah.
And Fox could have been like, Scott Messick did it. He's the one. Blame him. We're off the hook.
Yeah.
But they fought back, and the lawsuit was kind of crazy because they were, the show was nothing like Survivor except that it had an elimination, and our elimination was different. You know, it was all thematic. It was in a military thing. It was dismissal hill, and one voted off, one taken. There were different formats for the vote. And they were trying to make, basically what they were doing was trying to eliminate all competition in the reality space. They were trying to eliminate all shows with vote-offs. And it got fought, and I had to do depositions and, you know, all the crazy stuff. And I had to pay a lawyer a bunch of money. And then ultimately how it got settled is way up above in the boardrooms between Fox and CBS. It got settled that whatever money changed hands or whatever, I know part of the deal was that we wouldn't do any more seasons of boot camp. And even though it was a big show and a great hit and did really well for its season, you know, somehow, you know, the uppers, you know, made a deal. It's just the stuff that happens in entertainment or in big business.
Oh,
So,
that's kind of a bummer because that show was, it sounds like it was
great.
really great.
he saw it. It was a tremendous show.
Yeah.
It was a tremendous show.
What did you do after that? What did
I went and did like a crazy relationship show called Bachelorettes in Alaska. This amazing premise where women from the lower 48 who were fed up with men who wouldn't commit, right? They're totally fed up with men, looking to get married. They're in that 36, 39 range, like looking for that next category of their life, that next chapter to you know. And we had a bunch of 100 men in Alaska who were just dying for a woman, like dying to have women there. So we set it in Alaska, in the Kenai Peninsula, and we created this game show around it where, you know, the women fly in, and like the epic beginning. We called it Epic Cheese, actually. And the start of it is the women are in these white fur suits with like incredible wardrobe, and on a glacier in Alaska, there was 100 men all standing, and they fly in, and the women walk amongst the men, and they pick their man on ice, and it's like they can't talk to them. It's really just like, it literally is just short of like looking at their teeth and like, you know, figuring out if they're like, if they check the box of looking good, and, you know, and the women would circle them. It's like a candy store for women.
Oh my
And they
Lord.
pick whoever was hottest to them, and then they pair up for a while, and then over 13 episodes, you know, they pair up, and then we would bring in new men, and the women had to go on a date with some of these other men, and they could return to their man on ice. And it was all like, and what's interesting is the premise of it was behind the scenes and the deep part of it and what you have to do. Like, there could be no impediment to the women finding love. Like, the game could not be an obstacle. You always had to give the women the choice because they were the ones that were looking for love. They needed to be empowered. They needed to, you know, we would be evil as a show to block them from finding their true
love.
So we built all this crazy format stuff and shot in Alaska, and like,
Did they find love?
one of them, the end of the show was so cheesy in that at the end, each of the women were with somebody, and the man still had a choice of whether he wanted to propose to that woman.
Oh.
So the woman,
Oh, God.
the women had to stand on this beach on a lake in a snow-covered world, and her man would fly by in a seaplane and do like a flyby, like 15, 20 feet over. And some of them would loop around and land and get out and propose, or someone would just and leave the woman standing in a wedding dress. They were in wedding dresses, standing on the beach in the snow but one of them, the guy got out and proposed to her, and they were together she moved to Alaska, and they were together for a while. Like, it was real authentic love.
Oh, wow.
You know, so
there is a chance if you want to take a show on like that.
Yeah, if you look, there's a lot of, And what was funny is we did that show before The Bachelor came out.
Oh,
And it was True Love, and it was Fox held it. I forget what was going on. They held it for some reason. The Bachelor came out, and then we looked like a copy of The Bachelor. Like we were ahead of it, but we looked like a copy. And The Bachelor was such bullshit because it was like at the end of it, like we had a guy propose to a woman in a wedding dress on a beach in Alaska in the snow on a lake, gorgeous, beautiful, amazing. And The Bachelor was like, I'm going to give you this ring and we'll date.
I know.
Like it was always this bullshit ending. And you're like, that's not true love. There's just two people who just want to be on TV.
Yeah.
And and
that's, what, I could never get into The Bachelor. I never could. It was just so put on. It was
here's why The Bachelor works. Simple, simple, simple. It's the absolute perfect co-viewing because every woman has the fantasy of Prince Charming and the romance and being, taken to dinner and trips and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Every woman watches for the truth of romance, hoping for that romance. Every guy watches because his fantasy is 25 women fighting for me. It's a true thing. They're all in bikinis in the day, and it's just like so. It fits both.
But I always felt like watching that show, the women looked like I always felt. How are you okay with making out with this guy, and then he's going on a date to go make out with another girl, and that's part of the show, and you just have to it just kind of. In my mind, I was like, that's for the birds because I couldn't do that. I wouldn't be like, oh, I'm so here looking for love that I'm going to let him kiss everyone and find out if it's me.
There is a part of it where you get a little bit of a Stockholm syndrome. Like when you are doing that show, you are embedded in that world 24 hours a day, for a month. And all your world, is that, that guy and the crazy girls that you're with, and some you like and some you fight with, and the jealousies, and you're insulated in a, you're cooking in this little pot, you know what I mean? And
you're living it.
Yeah, you don't go to the 7-Eleven, and you don't go for a drive, and you don't go to work, and all you live is that.
Yeah, that's why I never signed up. But with those girls, I give it to them because it's a good show. I mean, my grandma watches it. She's 91, and she's like, oh, you got to watch The Bachelor. It's on tonight, hon. And they're going to give the final rose. And I'm like, I don't even know who was in the running.
But the stakes are high.
They are.
Love, the stakes,
Isn't it funny?
There's very few stakes that are higher than love, right? There are none really.
I was going to say, I don't think that there is.
And then the other stakes on a lot of these shows are money or a job or success, but love is the most electric, crackling, sizzling sort of stakes that you can have.
Right. It's very true. And I think it's just funny to, I'm sure some people, not to others, that you go on thinking that you're going to meet when you really don't know. But that's in everyday life. You don't know if you're going to meet your loved one at a 7-Eleven or, at the bar or whatever. But it's just kind of funny. The drama that goes into it is crazy.
Yeah. And some of those people are cast to be crazy.
Yeah, they are. And they do a great job. It's their normal life. So they're just bringing it on TV.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But so you guys started that type of show.
Reality TV in a lot of ways. I mean, look, there were a lot of other people that started. There was all those other shows I mentioned were all that wave, the first wave. And literally the things that are still on today are, Survivor's in its 48th season or something like that. Yeah, they do 2 a year. It's been 25 years. They do 2 a year.
I didn't realize they do 2. Wow.
And Big Brother is still on, and American Idol is still on, and Bachelor is still on, and they've all begat other versions of themselves. And Amazing Race, we didn't even say Amazing Race was a big format that came.
And I know I do tell people you were part of that as well, which is really cool. I was just thinking the Real World. I think that they have that Real World
Challenge.
Road Rules Challenge.
Yeah, the challenge.
I used to watch that because I loved the challenge part, like the athletic side of it, competing. And that's still going, I think.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, they've built those characters up and they revamp them. And, it's game competition. There's so many. Here's the thing about reality TV. Reality TV started small, but there are so many formats. Do you know what a format is?
Yep.
So the formats like game competition, Survivor, Amazing Race, America. Well, there's the game competition shows, right? Then there's relationship shows, dating shows. There's paranormal shows. There's occu-soaps. That's basically a soap opera built around an occupation, right?
Yeah.
Occu-soaps. Then there's the whole genre of housing and renovation.
Yeah.
There's a whole genre around food. There's a whole genre around survival.
Yeah.
There's a whole genre around just straight documentary.
Yeah.
Then there's family dramas. Then there's, the house shows. And there's shiny floor shows like, shiny floors like
Do it yourself type of thing?
no, shiny floor shows are like America's American Idol, right?
Oh, okay.
You
Yeah.
bring everybody out.
Okay.
It's a singing competition.
Yeah.
All takes place on a big shiny floor.
Yeah. Okay.
Dancing with the Stars, so you think you
there's-
can dance. Those are all shiny floor shows. But like every, HGTV shows, prepper shows, like there are so many
There's so many.
genres and formats that, it's great. Like it begat all of these formats. So it just became so big. And I've worked in a lot of the formats, not all, but a lot.
Yeah, you
sure.
have. Yeah.
Oh, true crime. True crime is
That's
gigantic.
that's so fun.
know.
That's cool that that's a whole other thing too. It's like all of these formats are satisfying. Like there's something satisfying in each one of them when you're watching them. It's like it does something. That's why there's so many and they're so popular. And the fact that you've been actually on the other side of it is really special. That's really cool. So where's the industry at right now and what do you have coming up?
Well, what I've done the last few years, like I did a really big show. Like I have a significant part of my career. I did car shows. I did a show called Top Gear, which was this amazing car show that was a British, one of the most popular shows in the world, right? It's a British show. And they brought it to America, and I was the American showrunner. And so I've done a lot of car shows.
Cool.
So the last couple things I did, one was a car show called Ride of Your Life with Courtney Hansen. And it was basically a very feel-good show where people, we would find people who were deserving. Like the simplest story is like a father and son would work on a car together, and then the son got cancer. So the father sold the car that they were working on to pay for the cancer treatments for the son. Cut to years later, the son has recovered, positive outcome.
Thank God.
The son works with us. We go find that exact same car, the hulk of it, like just from a junkyard. And then we have a garage team of people, and we build the same car.
So
We build that car out, and then we do a reveal, and the son is working with us, and we give that car to the guy.
I love that.
Yeah, it's a great
Oh
format.
my gosh, that's
done
my
like
kind of
20 of
show.
those.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, it
That's
fits your-
amazing.
It fits your format. But we did a lot of those. So I did a season of that recently. I'm working on a sports documentary now, which is just editing on the back end. It was already shot of this guy named Brian Shaw, who lives here in Colorado. He is the world's strongest man. He won it 4 times. He's got a family and a business here, and we followed his last year of competition, where he was trying to win his 5th title as the world's strongest man, and ultimately did not win that, but went on. He has created this thing called the Shaw Classic, or Strongest Man on Earth, and he went and won that, and that was his sort of swan song.
So cool.
So good, happy, and into sort of what his, next layer of his life is going to be.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
But
That's
it's like
wonderful.
there's just so many things that I've done. Like that's the crazy part. I've done so many shows and so many different formats and so many different things, and I'm on the tail end of it. You know what I mean? It's like I'm okay to be on the tail end of it, but a lot of unscripted TV and reality TV is fading a lot right now. There's just not as much. It seems like there's a lot on TV, but it's really a lot of the same stuff and a lot of the. There's not a lot of innovation. There's not a lot of risk. There's not a lot. And a part of it is, we've turned over every rock. Every sort of weird subculture there is has had a look. And, if you did it wrong, it just didn't, then people don't come back to it. People are really risk averse right now.
Oh, okay.
So.
Do you think that people are going to different things to view?
Yeah, they go to YouTube.
Yeah,
like all my kids are YouTube or
YouTube.
Like nobody watches television at a certain time, and we're also in this golden age of streamers putting money into content and creating incredible shows like Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones and Sopranos and
those are fun.
Severance and
Tulsa King.
Yeah, Tulsa King and all that stuff.
So, Scott, you and I have been friends for 4 years now, and it's just really cool to have it come full circle and working together. And I know I asked, what are you doing? And you're on the tail end of things, but I'm excited that you have come out to, if you want to share what you're doing with us.
Frightmare, what you and Josh's family, basically, I love that there's what Frightmare is. Does this audience know what Frightmare is?
A little bit. I brought Josh on as our first guest, and they know Josh is in.
So Frightmare is basically a family business, and based on our friendship and me really, coming out here and getting to know Josh, and Josh was looking for the story to be told, and on his own has a YouTube channel and has been sort of documenting it, and I just sort of came in late in the process to just sort of help shift the storytelling from more of a sort of like a outward bound, hey, come follow me, we're doing this today, we're doing this, to more of an observational thing, and sort of like the kind of shows that I do in a different way. And so we've been doing episodes of that, and we're going into another season of, following these main characters and, ultimately, trying to create a sizzle reel out of it. Like that's how things get sold to real television, like outside of, or legacy television. And, trying to create a sizzle reel and maybe see if, people are interested in it.
Well, and just so people know, just having somebody like you in your background and what you're doing and where you could spend your time now, and having you come on has been really special for us. And, I think of all the things that we shared today, you coming on to Frightmare and working with us on Frightmare has been exceptional. Having you here today has been such a blessing. I'm so happy you're here. I do. I love when you come out, and I'm really excited that we were able to link up outside of this and work together on something else. But is there anything you would like to share with our audience before we have to wrap up, of where they can find you? Is there where they can follow you, plug you in on, follow kind of Scott Messick and what he's doing? Is there anything you'd like to share with our audience? Okay. No. Don't follow Scott. He's on the tail end, guys. He's enjoying it. So we're the special. No, I'm just kidding. Just watch his shows.
Yeah, look,
but I love it. Is there anything?
I don't have so much on right now that that I don't need I'm happy where I am.
And we love that. And I just wanted to make sure, because, you are such a special individual, and I'm sure people just have fallen really wanting to get to know more of you. So I want to make sure I gave them that opportunity, but you guys are out. Sorry about that.
Yeah, look, if anybody wants to see all these crazy shows, there is messmediatv.com.
Okay, cool.
Right? It's simple, and you can look at clips from the shows and all that stuff. It just gives us sort of a bio and stuff like that, and it's not completely up to date, but there's a lot of good stuff on there.
I like that. That's awesome. So you heard it, messmedia.com if you want to see.
TV.
Messmediatv.com if you'd like to catch clips of the shows that Scott has done. check him out there. But we're so thankful you had time to come out today.
Yeah,
Thank
my
you so
pleasure.
much. All right, guys, that's it for today. But stay tuned because there's a lot more to come. We'll see you later.